Hey, church family, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. And you see a little bit different connection here tonight, and I've asked for some help. I think how neat it is when we have our Bible school class and we get that interaction, and even when our men's breakfast time, we have that time together, and afterwards we get a chance to have a devotional thought and share some ideas together. And I just love that interaction. So I wanted to bring that to us on a Wednesday night and see if we can make this work okay for the time being, the way we are doing things. So brought Wes and Chuck in to help me out tonight. So say hello, guys.
Hello, church.
All right. Again, to say, as I have on Sundays, it's a blessing that we have this technology and we can use this technology and come together this way. But I know it feels really, really strange not being all together. I guess even in a form of a question, guys, what do you think? Do you think we're going to really look forward to Bible study and connecting together when this thing is all over? Do you think that's going to be a real good feeling?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
I know we want to get back to the time where we can be together on Sunday morning, even Sunday night and Wednesday night. Hey, does this change your life a little bit? Not having this sort of regular connection. Have you guys noticed that this, Wes and Chuck? Have you noticed this changes for you? Anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chuck.
Alan Crawford called me on the way home today and just called to see how we're doing. He's got out of his crew, 4 of his crew have wives that are either in healthcare or in let's see, what are the other 2? I can't remember, but they're all connected with the public anyway, and 2 of them specifically around high risk jobs. So they told their guys stay home, so they're home. And so he's even more sequestered than I am. And we were just talking, we don't even know what day it is, because Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night are kind of markers in the week. So it just, you kind of lose track of your schedule and really, really miss the time getting together with the church.
Yep. Agreed.
Right. I've noticed that too. It's like the rhythm of our life. Right? Sunday is connect with church, and then we can start the week out and continue on. It's like we're missing a portion of that regular rhythm. Good. Well, so we've been reading through Proverbs this week, and I hope you've been reading along so far, and you've read some of it, maybe all of it. 31 chapters. You can plug in some earphones and have the internet read it to you, or YouVersion Bible or Bible Gateway or something like that. I hope you're taking advantage of that. Reading along, have the Bible in your lap, read along, or just if you have. Maybe you're a better reader than I am, or a more avid reader, and you just connect that time. So I encourage you to do that. As we've looked at Proverbs and been reading this, maybe you've noticed how the themes unfold, even in a book where we think, well, it's a collection of these thoughts, these ideas snipped together and pieced together. Really, you can kind of see a theme unfold. One of those themes is featured on the front of our study guides, and it is the theme of the fear of the Lord. And so we were talking about what we could visit about tonight, and maybe families could share in your own home or however you're joining us. And we could go over this thought of the fear of the Lord as being a primary theme as we look at Proverbs. So that's what we're going to do for the next few minutes. You ready, guys?
Yep.
All right. So on the list, in fact, there's 13 items on the list, but they start with, from chapter 1, verse 7, the very first of the references to the fear of the Lord on our list. I'm going to read it to you in total. So chapter 1, verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And so on the front of our outline, it just highlights the benefit. Okay, and so then we've got the second half of that verse, which actually kind of fleshes that out. But anyway, so the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. As we look at that verse and the other verses to come, let's start with just sort of an overview thought first before we get to the verses. And so, guys, when you think of this idea of the fear of the Lord, what comes to mind to you just at first, kind of an overview? What comes to mind of the fear of the Lord?
Yeah, it used to be a cowering feeling, but it's not. It's really that proper reverence that we're giving to God, because He is the creator of all. He's the creator of the wisdom and the knowledge that we need to have. So just the respect that He deserves.
Okay, all right. A proper reverence. Yeah, okay, good. Chuck, what comes to mind when you think?
I think the word that always comes to mind when I think about that is respect. God is the ultimate authority, and those aren't always words that we like in our society, or maybe even personally. I have a tendency to not like anybody to tell me what to do. You can just ask my wife about that. But to think about God being the ultimate authority and having that fear of Him, not fear as in terror, but fear as in a respect of His authority, respect of His right to make decisions the way He wants to. And so I think that's probably the word that resonates most with me, is just a respect of God, not maybe even as weak as we consider respect sometimes in our common politically correct speech, but a respect that is maybe more like you would expect in the military, where the commander says something and you just get it done. And that's the kind of respect I think we need to have for God, is that what He says goes.
All right. Yeah, I like that end. What God says goes. But think of the world that we live in. So these words, proper reverence, respect, authority. How are those words treated, or how do folks react to those words just in the world that we live in right now? Just in your experience.
Yeah, not very well. It's a lost art. Not only for God, but just for each other. It seems like we just don't have that level of honor and respect that God's just demonstrated and told us in the Word.
Okay, right.
I think a lot of it's a pride thing. We think that we should all be equal, that I should have the same respect everybody else should have. One of the common complaints about some of the younger generation today is that they come into the job thinking that they ought to be the CEO. And I think a lot of times we say that applies to the younger generation, but I think it applies to us too, as we have a hard time letting God be God and us being in the position of, I guess, submission to God.
Yeah. The created, and He is the creator, right? At the very least. And yeah, good. So I guess I hear that, and I think, rebel is one of the things that we that mankind is known to do, but it's just kind of in us, and it might be the Western or American thing. You're not going to tell me. Just think of a kid. How quickly does a kid come up with the phrase, "You're not the boss of me," right? Mm-hmm. Or something like that, right? You're not the boss of me, and so we want to do it. We want to do it our way, and so I'll just plant the seed, and we'll move into these verses. But think about how this connects even to the readings that we've done in our previous scripture references and our previous books of the Bible. And we've seen that cycle of mankind and God's chosen people and God's chosen leaders, and at every level, wanting to rebel and and sometimes just turn to God and say, "You're not the boss of me,"
Yep.
or something like that. So, chapter 1, verse 9. Again, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Guys, how have you seen that play out in your life, or what jumps out at you when we just start looking at it?
I know one of the things that stands out to me, kind of from a spiritual perspective, is I see, the fear of the Lord being the beginning of knowledge or the beginning of wisdom, very similar. And I think the reason is because when you're talking from a spiritual perspective, your objective is different. You're reading the Word, you're trying to understand God's rules and commands and instructions for our life, so that you can change, you can grow, you can mature. And so doing that, it just seems that your purpose is different, your objective is different. You give God the position of king, and so you submit to that. And from a worldly perspective, knowledge and wisdom are very different. Knowledge is understanding a lot of facts. Wisdom is the application of those facts in some ways, or in some way. But worldly wisdom and worldly knowledge are very different. From a spiritual perspective, I think they go more hand in hand.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, the beginning of knowledge, when it says that, to me, is the foundation. We're always told where our foundation lies, and it's with God and with Jesus. So if you start there, I think that's where the life gives you that direction that Chuck's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, the beginning, the starting point, and real importantly, the foundation. I like that, the foundation. And it's interesting that verse continues. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, wisdom, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. I guess in your lifetime, I'll just say it. You guys are getting old. Me too. In your lifetime, have you seen that to play out? I mean, maybe that's a ridiculously low-hanging fruit of a question. Maybe that's just a silly softball, but I mean, somewhat obvious. Have we seen that play out in our lives? So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Have we seen that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think, and the easy questions are the best ones, and the ones I can usually get right. But when you think
right.
about when you think about the fool, I didn't become a Christian until I was about 19, and so I have at least an associate degree in stupidity, and I lived by my own rules and my own objectives, and I was my own boss for quite a while. As soon as I got out of my parents' house, I mean, even when I was in my parents' house, I was somewhat, but especially when I got out on my own, I was my own boss, and I did things my own way, and it was really, really poor. And things just did not work out the way I thought they were going to work out. And it's because I was my own boss. I used my wisdom and my understanding and my knowledge, which is very limited, and I tried to run my life with that, and it just doesn't work. And so I thought I was wise, but I was a fool because I did not have, if you want to say, perspective or real wisdom. And so as I became a Christian, started to see what God had in mind for me, where I took myself off of the throne and put God on the throne, things work. Things fall in place.
Yeah, good. Thanks. I like the phrase, at least an associate's degree in being stupid or whatever.
Actually, a bachelor, but at least an associate.
Yeah, okay. I love, actually I think of the three of us, we get probably 150 years of at least some stupidity somewhere, right? I mean, so we get it, right? The Christian isn't perfect, just forgiven. We've been there. But when we stop and think and we realize that there's a time when we say, wait a minute, God, I'm with you. Maybe done with the old, maybe done with the foolishness may be ready to turn to wisdom. It's neat when we look at Proverbs, and again on the front of our study guide, this list of 13 that include benefits for our life, but let's go through those just real quick and think about how a life lived following wisdom, just to get these 13 things, what this is like for us here. The fear of the Lord is first the beginning of knowledge, chapter 1, verse 7. We did that. Chapter 8, verse 13 is to hate evil. So the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. I'm going to pause, just think, connect those two, right? So the fear of the Lord gives knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And now we see the fear of the Lord allows us to hate evil. You know, we talked about our own self being stupid in a period of life, but we also might find ourselves at a point where, well, is evil, is bad, is good. And think about that in our world. How does our world treat even good and evil, even good and bad in our world? I don't know, guys. When we even talk about good versus bad, how is that seen in the world that we live in?
Sometimes the opposite. You know, there's no clear definition. It seems like we know where the definition comes from, and it's from God, but the world makes up their own.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Thinking, it seems like we live in a time when there's no definition of right and wrong, let alone, or people challenge that, or even what you said, what is right is sometimes considered, it's upside down, right?
Yeah. There's the idea of relativism that, what I think is truth is truth. And I've even heard it said often that, well, that's your truth. Here's my truth. And that's such a foolish concept that I can have my own truth. It's like facts are relative and truth is relative. And if I make up my own, then it's real. And so anyway, just kind of that whole concept that it's my truth or your truth versus the truth.
Sure, right. That question of good versus evil, or right versus wrong, wisdom shows us that there is a difference, that there is a standard. God's standard is a much better way of making it through this world than our own. So think about the readings that we've had so far. I just want to connect this in here. How many times have we seen man rebel? Again, the children of Israel, God's leaders, rebelling against God. And remember that phrase that we hit on so many times already, back from the Judges, right? There was no king in the land, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And it never went well for them. They found themselves rebelling against God, right? And we live in a time where that relativism, we've said here, or just the lack of definition altogether of right versus wrong, it's impacting our world so much in so many ways. Oh, okay, so anyway, the fear, beginning of wisdom, is to hate evil. Chapter 9, beginning of wisdom, adds length to life. Chapter 10, verse 27, has a secure fortress. The fear of the Lord has a secure fortress. It is a fountain of life. Chapter 14, teaches a man wisdom. Again, chapter 14, or chapter 15, teaches a man to avoid evil. Chapter 16. So in chapter 8, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. And chapter 16, the fear of the Lord teaches a man to avoid evil. Leads to life, chapter 19, brings wealth and honor, produces a sure hope, brings praise to women. So chapter 31, that chapter that, I don't know, maybe mothers don't like to hear read on Mother's Day. You're right, that chapter 31 of Proverbs. Even that one, verse 30 says, the fear of the Lord brings praise to a woman. I want to think about a couple of these guys together, and that is length to life, and then has a secure fortress. So step one, step two. So question number one, have you guys seen this in your lifetime, that the fear of the Lord actually adds length to life? I wanted to touch on that. Just that one might seem a little more practical than some of the Proverbs might, but the fear of the Lord adds length to life. Have you seen that in your time?
Yeah, for me, it would be the peace that it gives me, knowing that I have a better life as I live here on earth, and also that we know that we have in heaven. So, and we live in a stressful world, so that peace is critical.
Yeah, very good. Peace. Yeah, good. Chuck?
I think one of the things, is some jokes that go around that, all emergency room visits in the South are preceded by, hey, watch this, or honey, hold my beer, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And when we're spending our time showing off or trying to be the coolest guy around or the toughest guy around or whatever, it has a serious impact on longevity of life. Where if we follow God's principles, it takes, like Wes was talking about, a lot of that stress and anxiety away, and some of the inherently stupid decisions that we're bound to do when we're left to our own devices. I think the other thing too is we're less likely to get caught up in some of the habits and some of the addictions that plague mankind when you're just seeking to do what feels good. You end up in a lot of bad places, and depression, anxiety, and alcoholism, and drug addiction, and pornography, all those things that are really focused around self. Now, I'm not saying nobody's going to struggle with those, or if you become a Christian, magically it all goes away, but we're less likely to struggle with that stuff. And if we do struggle with it, we have a way to deal with it, cope with it, and eventually overcome it. And that's through God, through submission to Him.
I think I especially like the last phrase that you came to in that. It's that we have a way to deal with these things. We may be susceptible to the same temptations and pitfalls, but we find ourselves in a position, Christians, God-fearers, right? There's our theme, God-fearers, have a way of dealing with these things that come our way. I've said it to the church family before, and who knows where this video will ultimately end up. Maybe somebody will see it that needs this phrase. But I've said this before, as a volunteer police chaplain, I'll get called occasionally to go visit someone at the county jail. And the conversation in the 90% range, maybe higher, very high, almost every conversation at some point has this phrase: life was going along pretty well, but then. And the next phrase is always, I'll broaden it, an addiction. Usually it's drugs. I'm talking to people that find their way into the jail system, but it's an addiction gets in the way. Now, pornography is so big in impacting the lives, but alcohol or drugs or other addictions. So life was going on just fine, but then, and the addiction might have taken over. And those, I'm kind of glad we steered into this for a few moments, because again, not that Jesus followers or God-fearers have that licked on the grand scheme of things. It's just we can find a way to cope and deal with some of these things. And we also mentioned stress, right? Wes mentioned stress earlier. The lengthening of life. I'll bet if we took the time to switch over to Google, we could find some information, I know we could, that says stress shortens our life. Maybe another silly question, but are we living in a stressful time now?
Yes, sir.
a silly yes or no question there, but
Yeah, there's really two parts to that too. Is that not only do stress and anxiety shorten our life, but they make it worse while we're here. So even if you manage to live the same amount of time, it just wouldn't be nearly as good as it is if you can let God take care of the problems in your life.
So true.
yeah, amen. Let God help to let that quality of life go.
It's a good phrase.
Here's the next one I queued up was has a secure fortress. Think about that phrase. I'll put it all together. The fear of the Lord has a secure fortress. What does that do for you? What does it jump out at you guys when you hear that and you think about your relationship with God, our connection to Him, our connection through Jesus? But think about this: the fear of the Lord has a secure fortress. Does that resonate with you?
To me, it goes back to that foundation a little bit. I guess that's what pops out to me is, it's never changing. It's strong. It's not going to waver at all. I know that His strength is always there as long as I, as Chuck points out, choose to do that. So that's how I see that.
Very good.
I think when I think of fortress, I think of battle. And a fortress is something that protects you from the battle that's going on. And we are in a battle. And sometimes battles get bloody, sometimes there's injuries and hurts and those kinds of things. But God being our fortress means that we have a protection and we have a help that's not available to those who don't have that.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I appreciate those thoughts so much. It's interesting as we look through this. I've heard people comment, well, and sometimes it's a rejection of Scripture altogether, and sometimes it's other just questioning of the say like Proverbs and say, oh, those old sayings. Okay, there it is. Sometimes we hear that the Bible's just old, just an ancient text. What meaning does that really have for us? And people try to take that down. But have you thought about that? Maybe as you've read Proverbs, have you seen things you go, wait a minute, that could be talking about modern times? Has that hit you at all?
Well, yeah, it seems simple. It really does. I mean, it seems like we complicate our lives and we complicate the things that we do. And going back to the Proverbs, it's so simple. It's just basic good.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay, so in the list, the fear of the Lord teaches man wisdom, teaches man to avoid evil, leads to life. I can't help but think, really, if we put a list together of things that we really want out of life, you know what? We want a longer life. People look for that. We try to avoid diseases, obviously. We want a good life. We want a good quality of life. And so many people are looking to find that in other ways. Our culture takes us down this path and down that path. And God has a plan for us. Guys, some final thoughts just as we've looked at the Proverbs, the fear of the Lord. Anything come to mind for a final thought, Wes?
Reverence, honor, give God the honor. You're doing your duty as a servant for Him, and try to begin that knowledge. Good.
I love that tie-in.
We talked about the fear of the Lord and the respect for His word and how the word governs us. And one of the things you've mentioned this a little bit on the side about what's going on now, why we're meeting via Zoom instead of in person. Really, the only way that we're able to stay together right now is through His word. And if we have respect for His word and really look at the value that His word provides for us, our opportunity as a church to stay together and to grow together, even in this time of separation, is to be reading through this stuff together. We're reading Proverbs this week, and what do we go to Second Kings next week?
I think
that what's coming up?
Ecclesiastes is next, yeah, right.
So start to be together even when we're apart, and so committing to reading God's word and growing together. We can still do that, even though it's not nearly as fun.
Very good. Oh, thanks for those tie-ins. Back to the reverence, the fear of the Lord. Back to reverence and respect. And Chuck, thanks for the plug. It's so difficult to stay connected, but we're trying. Hey, I'm going to try to share a screen here and point out where did it go here? I'm going to try to share a screen real quickly. We're learning as we go to get to there and share. Just got a few minutes left. So just a reminder, this is our members page, and you can get to that at kearneychurch.us. And I like that, kind of like Kearney Church is us. You can get to by kearneychurchofchrist.org, of course, or kearneychurch.org. But this gets us to our members page. We've got a short link there, kearneychurch.us, and the directory, online giving, family calendar, birthdays and anniversaries and such, as well as connections to our study guides here, and our weekly bulletin material, as well as to our live links. I know you're here now watching. If you're watching here, you're already here, is my point. But for Sunday morning, we have Facebook Live. And then afterwards, right now, we're still at a point of uploading to YouTube afterwards. But join us at Facebook Live. Now, I want to point out, I'm watching the time, one more thing here. And that is on the first page, front page of our website, the kearneychurchofchrist.org, or shorter, kearneychurch.org. On the front page, you can scroll down a little bit and we can see a link to a Facebook connection here. Looks like it's moving a little slowly here. We see this link here that says Facebook. There we go. And this is a public link. Anybody can get to this. Even if they don't have Facebook, they can get to the front page of this, kearneychurch.org, and they can connect to our Facebook Sunday morning lesson. Will pop right up there on Facebook Live. So I'm going to invite you to join us that way and connect with us. Church, it's great to spend this time together, and thanks for joining us tonight. Guys, Chuck, Wes, thank you for helping out with this. Really, really appreciate the connection tonight. So thanks, guys.
Yep, appreciate it.
All right. Church family, you're loved more than you could ever know, and glad to connect this way in any way that we can. But thanks for being with us, and good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Yes.